The history of video games began in the 1950s and 1960s, when computer scientists designed simple games and simulations as part of their research. The first known video game was a game called Tennis for Two, which was created in 1958 by physicist William Higginbotham. Players used knobs and buttons to hit a virtual ball back and forth on an oscilloscope screen. In the 1970s, video games became more popular with the advent of arcade games like Pong, Space Invaders, and Asteroids. These games were played in arcades and bars, and their popularity led to the creation of home consoles like the Atari 2600 and the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. In the 1980s and 1990s, video games became more complex and sophisticated, with the introduction of 3D graphics, sound effects, and narrative storylines. Games like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Dune became hugely popular, and video game consoles like the Sega Genesis and Sony PlayStation led to a new era of gaming. Today, video games have become a massive industry, with millions of people around the world playing games on their computers, consoles, and mobile devices. The history of video games is still unfolding, with new technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality pushing the boundaries of what is possible in gaming. Pac-Man is a classic arcade game created by Toru Iwatani and first released by Namco in 1980. It quickly became one of the most popular and iconic video games of all time and has remained a cultural icon for decades. The concept for the game came from an idea of Iwatani's to create a game that would appeal to women, as most arcade games at the time were designed primarily for male players. He came up with the idea of a game involving a cube character eating dots and avoiding ghosts, which he called Pac-Man. The game was originally released in Japan in May 1980 and quickly became a hit. Namco licensed the game to Midway for release in the United States, where it was renamed Pac-Man due to concerns that vandals may change the P in Pup to an F. Pac-Man was a massive success, becoming the highest-grossing arcade game of all time and spawning numerous sequels, spin-offs, and variations. The game has been ported to countless consoles and platforms over the years, and its characters and imagery have become ingrained in popular culture. Pac-Man's success has also paved the way for the modern gaming industry, helping to popularize the concept of video game characters and driving the development of more immersive and engaging games. Today, Pac-Man remains one of the most beloved and recognizable video game characters of all time, with a legacy that continues to influence the industry to this day. Street Fighter is a fighting video game series created by Capcom in 1987. The franchise has become one of the most popular and influential video game series of all time, with multiple sequels, spin-offs, and adaptations in different media. The original Street Fighter game featured Ryu and Ken, two martial artists competing in a global tournament to determine the world's strongest fighter. But in 1991, Capcom released Street Fighter II, which became an instant hit and revolutionized the fighting game genre. The game added 8 new characters, including Chun-Li, Guile, and M. Bison, and introduced gameplay elements like super combos and combos based on juggling opponents in the air. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 is a skateboarding video game developed by Neversoft and published by Activision. It was released on September 29, 1999, for the PlayStation and later ported to Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and Game Boy Color. The game was the brainchild of Tony Hawk, a professional skateboarder who wanted to create a game that accurately depicted the sport. The development team at Neversoft worked closely with Hawk to ensure that every aspect of the game was authentic, from the tricks to the skate parks. The game was a critical and commercial success, selling over 10 million copies worldwide. It was praised for its realistic gameplay, varied levels, and its excellent soundtrack, which included songs from popular punk and ska bands like Goldfinger and The Offspring. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 is credited with popularizing skateboarding culture and introducing a generation of gamers to the sport. It's spawned multiple sequels and spin-offs, including Tony Hawk's Underground and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD. In 2020, a remastered version of the game titled Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 was released for modern consoles, featuring updated graphics and new levels while retaining the original gameplay mechanics. Unreal Tournament 1, also known as UT99 or UT1, was released on November 30, 1999, by Epic Games. It was a first-person shooter game for Microsoft Windows and the first game in the Unreal Tournament series. The game was set in a dystopian future where different corporations and organizations would participate in deathmatches and tournaments to settle their disputes instead of going to war. Players had the option to choose different characters with unique abilities, weapons, and attributes, making each match more dynamic and challenging. UT99 quickly gained popularity for its fast-paced gameplay, effortless multiplayer capabilities, and modding support, allowing players and developers to create custom mods, maps, and skins. The game also introduced the first-person shooter genre to online rankings and competitive play. Several expansion packs were released for UT99, featuring new maps, game modes, and weapons, and the game received regular updates, patches, and player-made content. The success of Unreal Tournament 1 led to the development and release of several sequels and spin-offs, cementing the franchise's position as one of the best first-person shooter games in history. Despite being over 2 decades old, UT99 still has a dedicated player base, active modding community, and professional sport scene. Call of Duty is a first-person shooter video game developed by Infinity Ward and published by Activision. It was released on October 29, 2003, for Microsoft Windows. The game is set in World War II, and the player takes on the role of several Allied soldiers in different campaigns across Europe. The game features a mix of infantry, vehicular, and air combat, and includes both single-player and multiplayer modes. Call of Duty received critical acclaim upon release, with praise given for its intense, realistic combat, immersive storytelling, and cinematic presentation. It was also a commercial success, selling over 4.5 million copies worldwide by 2004. The success of the first Call of Duty game led to a series of sequels, spin-offs, and remasters, and it has become one of the most popular franchises in the video game industry. The gameplay and storytelling of Call of Duty have influenced many other first-person shooter games, and helped to set the standard for the genre in the 2000s.